Somebody said to me, "Oh, you've been in two of the most successful series in the last century." I said, "Oi, less of the last century, will you?" Yeah, I know I'm 78, but quite frankly, you know.
Hello and welcome to I Know That Voice, the podcast about voice actors and voice acting. I'm Keith Wickham. I'm a voice actor, have been for 30 years. You'll know me best probably as Sir Topham Hatt from Thomas and Friends, as well as Gordon, Henry, Edward and various other engines in the show.
You get on with it, Keith.
I'm also Professor Inkling and Shellington in the Octonauts, and I was a koala brother. I was Cornel and Watch My Chops. I was in 64 Zoo Lane. I was also Change Daily in The Secret Show.
Show isn't about you.
I thought it'd be nice to talk to my fellow voice artists about their profession. These are people whose voices you will know, but who could still go to the supermarket without being mobbed. Today I'm very pleased to have as my guest a man who's very familiar to radio listeners since 1974 as the voice of Mike Tucker in The Archers, and also very familiar to Doctor Who fans, sounding a bit more like this than his normal voice. But nevertheless, he is Davros in the Daleks, among many other roles he's played. And here he is. It's Terry Molloy.
I think we've got enough there.
Terry Molloy, what an honour.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yes, I don't hide under a rock these days.
Where were you born? Where were you born? Just to clarify.
I was born at the stage door of the Theatre Royal in Bath. Well, in the hospital, but the waters broke there.
Wow.
And my mother was from Tyneside, and so we went, all the family are from Tyneside. So I was brought up away from that and made to ensure that I spoke properly. But
I'll start by asking about you and how you started, what your career was initially to get into what you got into in the end.
Yeah, I actually wanted to be a vet, but when I took my O-levels, I didn't get one single science subject. It took me 3 goes to get maths, so that was off the table, really. I suppose because my mother had been on the boards as a child actress and as an adult, as a soubrette, she did variety with all the big names back in the 20s. I suppose it was in the genes that I would probably want to head on to the boards at some point or other.
Your father wasn't?
No, my father was a wing commander in the RAF. He was very against theatre and all of that. No.
That's totally different, isn't it?
Totally different, no. In fact, he said to me, "You'll be a clown over my dead body," which proved to be somewhat prophetic because he died when I was 16.
Okay.
I thought about what I wanted to do, and I thought, well, veterinary science isn't going to be in it. But I just didn't want to do a 9-to-5 job, you know.
Okay.
And I enjoyed acting. I did a lot of acting at school. And so I applied to drama schools when I was coming up to A-levels and what have you.
Okay.
Applied to RADA. But at the time I was living in Bournemouth. And although they would agree to pay the fee, they wouldn't pay any subsistence. So that effectively said no. So I said, all right, well, I'll go to Liverpool and study music and drama up there. And they threw money at me, of course, for that. In those days they did, you know. But actually, the final year was a great year because it was a purely practical year of drama, working as shadowing Peter James at the Everyman and Dick Tuckey at the Playhouse. And I think I probably learned a lot more than that than I would have done after, I didn't really need to know fencing or horse riding, and I could speak all sorts of different accents anyway. So,
Yes. And what year would this be, roughly?
65 I went up. I came down in 68, at which point I had a certificate in teaching as a result of that, or a BA in teaching or whatever it was. But I thought, no, I don't want to do that either. So I applied to a children's theatre company run by Brian Way in Neasden, and he was quite a pioneer in children's theatre, doing it in the round. And I got in, and so that was it. I suddenly started working in the theatre, going around schools all over the country, doing plays in the round, and they were very specific plays written for 5 to 7-year-olds, 7 to 9-year-olds, and 9 to 11-year-olds, and then there were secondary tours as well.
After that, was it a constant? Then after that, were you unemployed for any periods?
I kind of left there.
In?
Because I'd applied to Stoke-on-Trent to work with Peter Cheeseman. They needed an actor in Death of the Salesman to play Bernard. And so I was called up to audition for him and got the job. And that was it. I kind of basically started the next week. I worked at Stoke, and then I left, and then there was a period of unemployment. But then I was offered a job back there, running the Talks organisation, which was interaction with outside bodies like schools and women's institutes and things like that, talks and tours as a theatre, doing one show in two as an actor. And I was there for about 3 years, doing a whole range of stuff, including, one of their famous documentary dramas, Hands Up For You, The War Is Ended, and a load of other stuff as well.
Great. I mean, this is a fantastic grounding. Presumably, this is
all kinds and also
of,
because it was in the round, I knew the media, I knew the way of working in the round. A lovely way of working. You kind of have to act with your back as well as your front. During that time, I was seen by one of the producers at Pebble Mill, who invited me to come down and do an audio, which I did around the time I was leaving Stoke and taking up a job at the Midlands Arts Centre as Associate Director. From that, I started a kind of a radio career, as they obviously liked what they heard and kept on using me, which I was very pleased about,
That was very lucky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because...
I mean, pure luck.
Yeah.
Because I worked at the Midlands Arts Centre for a couple of years, directed there and acted in quite a lot of the plays, including the one play I'd love to have done again, The Resistible Rise of Arturo Ui.
Oh, Arturo Ui, yeah.
But I did it when I was far too young.
Yes.
But I'd love to have done it at the right age, but I never did. But so, yeah, I did some work at Pebble Mill. It was, little bits here and there.
Did you do much telly for them?
I did a thing called The Exercise, which was set on the Brecon Beacons, which is about a cadet corps. And there was me and Christian Rodsker playing officers, taking this cadet force out on exercise. The commanding officer strictly told us that you are in uniform and the squaddies in the camp do not know the difference between an officer and an actor. So you will return salutes because you will get them. There was a lovely moment at one point. We were doing some night shooting and we were in the middle of this vast open plain in the Brecons, and the chuck wagon came out from Swansea and delivered us some food. And so we were all standing around the chuck wagon chewing our hamburgers and hot dogs and things, when suddenly the ground around us erupted. Right. And we were faced with about 80 SAS troops with their guns levelled. So after changing the trousers, we all froze and they just disappeared. They'd obviously used us as an exercise in covert approach.
Oh, it's either that or they hate actors.
There could be that, yes. They've seen many episodes of Ain't Half or Hot Mum. So we'll get our own back.
Yes. But it was mostly radio. So
it was mostly radio, and that continued apace. But the director of that suggested me to Jasper Carrott's management, or to Opix Films, because they were going to do a film about three lads on holiday in Spain, and they needed a good Brummy drunk. I don't know how my name came up, but there we are. I was doing a play for Today with Francesca Rannis playing her brother, and so I wasn't able to go down to see them about this Jasper Carrott job. And then about nearly a month later, I was down in London talking about doing a play about a brass band all together now at Greenwich. And I got a call from Opix Films saying, we're sorry we weren't able to let you have the job, but, we'd love to use you at some point. And if you're around, let us know. I said, well, I'm down in London at the moment. I said, well, come round and have a little meal. So I went round to Soho and had a little nosh, and they kept asking questions like, when was I doing the Greenwich job and what was happening and what did I do this? I got home and my wife was standing there with a suitcase saying, you're on the 7 o'clock train to Manchester. You start filming tomorrow morning with Jasper Carrott. It was an audition and I didn't know about it. So there I was, a month in Spain with Jasper and another lovely actor, Bernard Latham, which went out on London Weekend Television.
What was it called?
It was called Carrot del Sol. It was a bit chaotic, really, because we ended up making a comedy programme with no script. We didn't know who we really were, so we were making it up as we went along. We'd sit down at night and say, what should we do tomorrow? You know, Bernard and Jasper turned up with plates full of food. I turned up with 2 boiled eggs and 2-litre bottles of wine, which I consumed throughout the whole of this, right. At the end of which I was absolutely hammered. And we had to do a football match against the Spanish waiters in the afternoon, which we were filming, and I was playing in goal. And the only thing I remember about that was hanging on the goalpost at one point and Jasper having to come down and come and get me off. But, I mean, going back in time with all the radio stuff, I was suggested by Tony Cornish, who was then the head of radio drama, to apply for a part in The Archers. Well, they were looking for a replacement for Mike Tucker. Gareth had been playing it. He then got a job with the radio rep and wasn't available, and so they brought me in because he'd only done 2 episodes, and they basically had me auditioning a scene with Dan and Doris, which I knew about them. I wasn't a great follower of The Archers, but I was aware of them, and they were basically listening to the original recording and matching me with it. And they said, and again, it was one of those, right, that's lovely. We'll see you next week. To do these next set of scenes, and your fee will be 7 guineas an episode. We still got paid in guineas. I mean, this was about 1973. Yes, obviously that went on, has been going on for 50 plus years.
But the Archers thing, that was a major part of your career, wasn't it? That was
yes, very much so. And very much a delight, because audio has always been my go-to place. I was about 9. And we were. My father was in the RAF. We were stationed out in Aden, and my mother was working for Aden Forces Broadcasting. She was doing Auntie Sheila and Letters from Home and all of that. But she used to have to check the transcription records that were sent over of the Goon Show. Now there was only one building in Aden that was air conditioned, and that was the studio. The record store wasn't. So the guys had to take a record out of the record store on a plate of glass, hold it up to the sun, put a plate of glass on top of it until it went flat, run it into the studio and play it.
Seriously? It was so hot there was warping the records?
I mean, we're talking, 120 in the shade. It was not a pleasant place to be. She had to listen to all these transcriptions to make sure that they were okay, there were no hiccups or bumps or anything, and I used to listen with her. And I had a sort of like sponge memory. I'd take this in. And there was one episode which really hit me. Nelly's trying to go to South America. And so he goes to Henry Crunn's shipping office and he says, I'd like to go to South America. Right, we better take some details then. Name, Seagoon. How do you spell it? S-E-A-G-O-O-N. S-E-A-G. So now this went on for about 5 minutes. At the end of which Henry said, it's no good, I'm going to have to get a pencil and write all this down. This is the power of radio. It's in your mind. And that's what really attracted me to it, and it's been my love ever since, really.
And you were very lucky getting in when you did, I think.
Oh, yes.
Because radio drama then was huge, and it was a proper rep company. There was proper money. It was properly done. It was
all done in regions, and the regions had their own budget to get their own writers in. And I worked for a long time with the head of radio drama up in Pebble Mill, and he basically helped me to learn my trade at the radio. By putting me in everything, one-handers, two-handers, back of the crowd, everything. But in 81, I did a play for Ron Hutchinson called Risky City, which all took part in this guy's head, and it was done in binaural stereo. So listening on headphones, you could hear these whispered voices into each ear. And it was about a kid who'd had his head kicked in a car park in Coventry after a night out. And he was just lying there in intensive care with this bleep in the background going, and interviewing all the people in his life. And it was phenomenal. It really was an amazing piece of work. It had originally been a rock musical for Coventry Youth Theatre. Well, it basically won me what is now the Sony. It was the year before. It was then the Pi Radio Award for Best Actor. So I got that little thing on my shelf, and onward and upward, and didn't work for about 6 months afterwards. Which is, of course, the way,
It's always the way.
Isn't
I've
it?
heard this so often.
Yes, yeah. Oh, he'd be far too busy. We won't bother to call him.
Yeah, you're too successful. We won't let you do any more.
No.
Yeah. Just to fill people in very quickly, for those who don't know, Davros, he was the leader of the Daleks in Doctor Who, and it was originally in Genesis of the Daleks in 1975, and that was played by Michael Wisher in the original series and David Goodison in 1979 in Destiny of the Daleks. Terry played him from 1984 to 1988 and has gone on playing him ever since. And this is how Terry got the part.
There was one point where I hadn't been in the Archers for about 6-8 months, and I was offered a job down at TVS, which was a 26-part of a thing called Radio Phoenix, which was set in a radio station in which they wanted me to play this twit of a DJ. So I let the Archers know that I wouldn't be available. And Bill Smethers at the time rang up and said, what's this, you're not available? We might have some big stories coming up. I said, what you might have? So you're asking me to turn down 26 episodes of television for some might-have big stories. Well, I'll have to recast it then. I said, well, fine, do that. So that was it. I went off and did Radio Phoenix. Now, the director on that was a guy called Matthew Robinson. And around that time, 82, 83, they were going to do another bring-back of Davros with Mike Wisher returning to the role. And thanks to the BBC technicians who went on strike, everything was put back a month. So the director was working on something else. Mike Wisher was off on tour in Australia or somewhere. And Matthew Robinson was brought in to direct it. And he rang me up. He said, do you know anything about the Daleks? Did you know anything about Doctor Who? I said, of course. I was 16 when it started. Yeah, fanboy. He says, you know about the Daleks? And I said, oh, yeah, absolutely. He said, and Davros? I said, no. Who's he? Because after Hartnell and Troughton, I went off to university, I went off to work and everything. We didn't have videos in those days. So I totally missed John Pertwee and Tom Baker. So I had no idea. So anyway, he sat me down in front of it and said, this is it. And I thought, this is a radio job behind a mask.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, I can do that. I thought, well, it's just for the one job, It's carried on. I did it with Peter Davison, first of all, then Colin Baker, twice, once as a real person and then once as Davros, and also with Sylvester McCoy. And since then been doing endless big finishes as well. Over the years with most of the Doctors now, including David Tennant and Tom Baker and Paul McGann and,
Again, as with all these actor stories you hear, this was total fluke.
Absolute fluke.
It was
complete and utter. I hadn't applied for it. I didn't think I'd ever be in it. And I didn't really have an agent at the time. But I did get an agent as a result of the Jasper Carrott film. And it was through that I then got the Radio Phoenix. I never auditioned for it. I just did it.
It's extraordinary, isn't it?
I mean, quite extraordinary, really. These days where people would kill to get an audition, let alone be in it. So here I am all these years later, still doing the conventions, still, doing the old audios and things, and it's a beast that inhabits me, and probably looking a little more like Davros than I did back when I was 34.
The actual process of doing Davros. Did it take long to make you up? Was it a difficult job to do physically, or was it much easier than people assume it was?
Well, the first thing they had to do was make a new mask.
Yeah.
So I had to go down to special effects at Acton, and they, covered me in alginate and then covered that in plaster of Paris and let it set with 2 straws up my nose. Then they cracked it open, and that was the mould from which they made the mask. But it was done in foam latex in those days. So it was actually in one piece which wrapped around my head like a latex glove, It was only when you took it off you realised how much sweat there was inside when it all poured down your chest. Yeah. And then it was attached at the back with, the blue thing that contains the framework and all the electric wires. The process of putting it on and being made up took about a good couple of hours.
Okay.
Because they had to make up my eyes behind the mask so they couldn't be seen, and make up my mouth, which could be seen. And the final part of that was washing my mouth out with black food dye to make my teeth black as well.
Oh, of course, yes.
It was awful. It was the most disgusting thing I ever had. But then you had probably another hour being fitted into the chariot. And people say, oh, wonderful, you've got this brilliant chariot. You zip around. I said, no, this is the BBC. You've got a supermarket trolley base, right? Which always goes one way when you want to go another.
It was literally a supermarket
trolley
base.
It was literally, I think it was, literally a supermarket trolley base. Surround that with 4x2 timber. Put 2 lead 12-volt car batteries in the back to run all the electrics. Cut a hole in the floor and say, drag it with your toes and don't wobble. You know, I mean, they're not going to spend money, the BBC, are they? On the delights of an electric wheelchair or anything like that. I staggered around in this thing. It was easy to go backwards. Going forward was more difficult, but thankfully it was in small bursts. And
the voice, was that modulated on the spot, or did they post-produce that?
No, they modulated it in the box. But it wasn't the same as a Dalek voice. It was a slight ring modulator, which made it slightly electronic. The voice ostensibly was mine as Davros.
Right.
Yeah, I did Resurrection of the Daleks, thinking that was going to be the only one, which apparently had a higher body count than Rambo. But I wouldn't let my children watch it for ages. You know, I thought, no, you're not watching this. They were 5 and 7, you know. But I did come down one morning and see that they'd stolen the VHS and had put it on. So I snuck around, looked round the door, just as Davros makes his appearance from the mist of the cryogenic chamber and all of this, you know. And Philip, my little 5-year-old then, said, oh, look, it's my dear, lovely daddy. I was very worried on so many counts.
You weren't that recognisable.
No.
In that costume.
Oh, no.
They just knew it was you.
They knew it was me because they knew I'd done this thing, you know.
Yeah.
Because I then went on to do Attack of the Cybermen with Colin, which was again Matthew Robinson. He brought me back as a real person, as an undercover cop. I had to be killed at the end of the first episode, which is when I discovered that if someone dies at the end of the first episode, when they do the second episode, there's no body. Because the BBC contracts have got this thing that if there's a body there, they have to pay you for another episode. So
nothing to do with the drama.
Good Lord, no.
Effect.
Heavens to Megatroid. No. So
it's your 3 Guinness fee, or
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Then we went on and did Revelation together, which was fabulous. I mean, just such a fabulous, dark, gothic piece which Graham Harper directed. And with such a cast list. There was Eleanor Bron in it. There was Clive Swift. There was Alexei Sale, Jenny Thomas. A whole range of wonderful, wonderful actors, in which I was a part of, you know. And it was then that Colin and I really started to, become great friends. And it carried on from there.
And you were lucky in the sense, I guess, that visual fame, I suppose, was never one of your things. You never wanted that particularly, or did you? Or you?
No.
You weren't disappointed that nobody recognised you. You were quite happy with
no.
anonymity.
Very happy to get on the bus or on the tube without anybody knowing who the hell I was. That's lovely. The only time I've been recognised was in a lift by a blind person who suddenly said,
your voice.
"Are you Mike Tucker in The Archers?" I wasn't speaking in Mike Tucker voice, but there was obviously something in the cadence of the voice.
Yes.
That made it. I know that voice, and I found that unbelievable.
And other stuff. There were spin-offs from this. Did you do much else because of all of this stuff? Was that you get more employment because of this success, or was it just
not really.
Life as normal?
No, life went on as normal. Really, I mean, it took fandom probably about 5 years to discover where I was. Inviting me to conventions and things. because of course I'd done one with Sylvester as well, which is
because that was the end of that period.
That was the end of that period when
there was a big gap, wasn't there?
Grade pulled the plug on them,
Yeah,
and
in the gap, in the interim, how many years that was? 10 years or something. Were you doing much Doctor Who related stuff, or were you just carrying on being an actor in other things?
I started. I started doing Doctor Who related stuff probably late 90s, and started to get picked up by people for conventions here, there and everywhere. I didn't know anything about them, but I learnt very quickly.
And so there was the fan stuff and all the convention stuff. Is that a later thing, or was it happening when you were in the main series?
It was beginning to, in a way, because they used to take them out. The new Doctor used to go and do an event in the States, and and
okay,
they publicised it very well, very highly. So things were starting to happen, but they were very much small fan-run events, which I love. To me, they are the best because you can talk to people, and the idea of just going along and selling people photographs is not my idea of fun. I like to talk to people because I was a fan. We have a commonality. We have an extended family relationship, as it were.
Yeah.
In that respect. So, I started to do quite a few of those, and doing bits and pieces of stage work as well. Until just recently, Colin and I were reunited to do The Hound of the Baskervilles on stage as a radio play. It looked like Baker Street, but the Foley was there, the technician was there, people would sit on chairs coming up to the mic when it was their turn, and we all had our scripts, which was perfect. On stage with a script, lovely.
Yep.
I'll go for that. One of the spooky things about that was you look out at the audience and you see a lot of people with their eyes shut, and you thought, oh gosh, they're all gone to sleep. They were listening to the radio play.
And they didn't want to watch you doing it.
They didn't. Well, not that they didn't want to watch you, but they would take moments of just going out of it and just listening to it.
I think you've already answered this question, but I mean, would you say theatre, television, or voice work is your main thing? Would you enjoy the most, or is it all good for you?
Voice work, always.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Stage, definitely, because that. It charges the creative batteries almost. You're getting feedback, and it's a slightly different feedback every night. And that I cherish. Film, boring as hell. I mean, just you sit around for hours. I don't chase it. If somebody offered me a job, obviously I would love to do it. I'd love to go back into Doctor Who as somebody different. Davros' dad. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's a time travel show. You could be his son, only older.
Much older.
It would be a really clever twist.
Very old, very old.
He could meet himself, his younger self.
Coming back.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, the computations are endless in the world of Doctor Who. I love playing around with people, and they sort of say, what's all this about a woman, being the 13th Doctor? I said, what? When Jodie Whittaker was announced, I said, well, the 13th Doctor's going to be a woman. I said, how do you know? He said, well, they've announced it. I said, no. How do you know she's the 13th? Perhaps she was the first.
Yes.
No, we've seen no, what you've seen is what the BBC chooses to put out. And the dimensions are endless. They can be...
It is one of the most extraordinary concepts in television, isn't it?
Yeah.
Doctor Who. At the time it was made, the original Hartnell series, like Coronation Street at the time, I don't think they saw it going beyond one series.
No.
It's bigger now than it was then. I mean, I'm guessing it's...
Well, the budget was a lot bigger as well.
Oh, now it is.
The budget for the first one of Hartnell was about £8,500.
Oh, it would have been...
For everything.
Nothing.
That included the actors, the set, the cost, everything. So
I remember how they used to. I used to remember how they used to make the TARDIS appear.
Yes,
which is that they just have a wall and the noise.
Yeah,
and you would assume that it had appeared behind the wall, and then they just cut
to the thing in front.
So they didn't have to do any special effects.
No. I mean, it made it very creative for the cameramen because they had to do wobbly cam of their own. They had to do all sorts of things that. they couldn't do because they had no CGI in those days, and I think it made some of the stories a lot better as a result.
One of the things I'm asking people on this thing, and I'm not sure how much this applies to you or not, but how concerned you are about AI and the changes in the voice industry. Is that something that affects you a lot, or are you not thinking about that much?
It does concern me very much.
Right, right.
The fact that they can just take somebody's voice and use it,
yes,
in another way. Like this Scottish girl that did announcements for ScotRail, or they've suddenly decided that they're using it on ScotRail, and she'd signed a clause that it could be used, but not in AI, and I find that very worrying indeed in both audio and in television as well. It's going to be as near as damn it, but it's not the real thing. And AI books read by AI people that don't have the same ability to connect with the words and deal the inflections. You can take the voice, but you can't take the thought process that's inside the human body. When I've done classes with students about radio, I said, what's the most important thing on radio? And they'll say, oh, this, that and the other. And I say, no, it's silence. If you're doing a speech, but you just leave it hanging with an umbilical cord that takes you into the next thing, that is amazing.
Yes.
I don't think a computer can do that. It wouldn't know why it was doing it.
What that meant.
Or what that meant.
No. From the sound of it, you haven't done an awful lot of corporate work or voice, straight voices for...
No, I don't. I don't do a lot of that now.
No, because that's the stuff that's already gone to AI.
Yeah. No, I don't. The only thing I do corporate now is voicing a character in a kid's game thing on but it's not my voice anyway. It's somebody else's because I do lots of different voices. And I'm blessed with the ability of doing a lot of dialects and a lot of accents. And
yeah.
I always say to people, for God's sake, don't try and do a Geordie accent unless you were born there, because it's so difficult. It's like a dialect is like music. If you can hear the music, you can do it. If you can hear that music, you can put in the actual reality of how the words should sound. But it's initially being able to grab the music of that dialect and then using it.
And Mike Tucker, what was that?
Well, he was like Loamshire, really. He was like Gloucester, but he's kind of like a pair of old carpet slippers I can put on. I live what I call a carpe diem manana life. I will seize the day or those bits of it I want to, and I'll leave the others to manana. It's no point worrying about it anymore.
No.
People say, "Are you happy?" I said, "No, I'm content. I have what I have. I have a roof over my head. I have food on the table. Yeah, we rack up debts as we go along, but I live in the perpetual world of something will come along tomorrow, and it usually does,
Yes.
Like I suddenly got a cheque today for royalties from Big Finish, which I didn't know about. Blimey!
Wow. Okay.
That came out of the blue. Well, lovely. Thank you. In fact, the one job that has lasted me the longest, I got £50 for it when I first did it. It was when I was working at Stoke and the BBC were coming through with the thing. So we need 3 actors to work as kind of backdrop to this thing at Chettleton Flint Mill about James Brindley and making flint and watermills and things. So I was one of the Flint Miller's assistant, and they kept me on for the next day. This turned out to be The Ascent of Man. Yeah?
Wow.
Jacob
Wow.
Bronowski.
Yeah.
Now, that 50 quid, I probably earned more from that over the resale to Afghanistan of 49 pence, I just think it's ridiculous,
Well, I think that's about it, Terry, for the podcast. So thank you so much.
Not at all, Keith. Lovely to talk to you. You have been listening to I Know That Voice, presented and produced by Keith Wickham. And today's guest was me, Terry Molloy, the voice of Mike Tucker in The Archers, and Davros in Doctor Who. Remember, resistance is useless.